Now, this is a pretty long question, so bear with me. When you left Facebook, you wrote a pretty inspiring message that's on TechCrunch right now. And since then, you've gone on to invest and mentor many entrepreneurs and companies. As an investor, when you encounter a founder who has had past failures, do you view that as battle scars that make him stronger now? Or is it, proof that that founder doesn't have a good track record?
It depends. It depends on how they failed. I would say, like, I still believe everything I wrote in that departing note that I sent to the people at Facebook. I did I had a functional role, but part of my job at the end was probably to be this kind of curmudgeonly old timer who made sure that we never kind of veered off of our Northern Star. Look, when companies work, the biggest thing that happens is you revert to the mean. And what I mean by that is the mean is every crappy company out there. And we all work at crappy companies. We've all done it. We all look at our boss and think, this guy's an idiot. How does he have this job? This company's so stupid. I hate my job.
Right.
Is it time to leave yet? We've all been in that position. And so the real question that I was asking myself at Facebook was, what happens and how do companies end up in this situation? And my realization is every company gets there eventually. But that last word is the most important. And so the challenge of a senior executive team is to prevent that regression to the mean. And culture is the only thing that does that. And so I would always speak to all of the people that we hired every Monday. And, part of it was to scare the living shit out of them. But part of it was to, be unapologetic about a culture that valued transparency, openness, authenticity, and value over perception. So it's not about politicking. It's not about managing up. It's about doing good stuff. And that the engineer that could be the most junior person has as much or more power than me. And that's an awesome dynamic, right? Because it allows the smart people who are capable to do the right thing. So that's what I talked about. So when I left, that note was meant to encapsulate all of that. I think I've realized that all of that is still the same. So when I meet an entrepreneur and they failed, the thing that I'm trying to figure out is how did they fail? Is it, again, and this is going back to what we talked about earlier, did you just not listen and keep battering your head because you heard something or read something and you just, didn't refuse to pivot? That kind of stubbornness can be good, but it can also be extremely destructive. Did you fail because you got the market wrong, but you built a great product? That's actually not such a bad thing. That happens, right? Happens to the best of us. I mean, I failed more times and then the last thing is, are you comfortable with that failure? So the people that can own it, in my opinion, that's a very special class of person. And part of it is just being around enough people. That's why Silicon Valley is so great, because it celebrates failure as much as it celebrates success. And I think that's awesome. I grew up in Canada. Mm-hmm. I love Canada. But what's frustrating about being Canadian is we don't celebrate failure.
Right.
And so it's all about mean reversion. It's all about managing the middle. And so if you're an outlier, you feel extremely isolated and you feel stupid when things don't go right, as opposed to trying to learn from it, rinse and repeat, try again.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out, how did they fail and what did they learn? In general, I think it's a good thing. In general, though, what I would say more importantly than anything else is, are you humble enough to realize that when things worked, it was you, but it was also a lot of luck? And then are you courageous enough to realize that when it failed, it may not have been as much you, but you've learned enough to now avoid the same mistakes? Those are the two things that you have to figure out. You have to be humble enough to realize timing is everything. People are everything, right? The team, the conditions, your competitors, so many things came into making something work at that time. It's not so replicable. Similarly, failing, if you failed for the right reasons, that could be great DNA to go again and try it again.
Now, a while back, in a bunch of other interviews, you mentioned that in the past, you wanted to jump into the VC world and you sent out internship letters, right?
Yeah.
And you got a bunch of no's back, but you kept going and you found your way into this world. So,
well, no, I got no response back. The two people that wrote me a no, which I remember to this day because I still look up to these two people and they're the most incredible people in the world, John Doerr and Vinod Khosla. They're the only two people. And look, to this day, they probably don't remember that they did it. This was in 1997. Maybe they do. I don't know. I've never asked them. I haven't kept I can't find the letters now, which is real shame. I thought I had them until about 2007, 2008. And I don't even know if maybe it was just their EA, that wrote it and they signed it, or I don't even know if it was a stamp. It didn't matter. To me, it was just like, I really wanted to see what this world was about, because I was like, wow, these guys are like creating the future. I want to create the future. Right. No one even gave me the time of day. They were like, I literally sent like 50 letters. The only two people who were thoughtful enough to take the time to actually send something back saying, thank you, but we don't hire interns, was these two guys.
Right. So now, going off of that, how should entrepreneurs deal with no's when they talk to VCs? Like, does it mean that your idea is terrible, or does it mean that you're just not there yet, you're not fit to run a company?
It means neither of those things. Listen, there is a massive lemming culture and mentality in most industries. And, when you're looking on the outside in, the tendency is for most people to assign more credit than most industries deserve. So when I'm on the outside looking in to the hedge fund industry, what I'm probably thinking is, wow, they're all geniuses. These guys just know what's going on. They're manipulating the world. Capital flows, finance, the stock market.
Right.
And what you realize on the inside is not really. Most are bozos, and most are following a few guys who really know what they're doing. I could be on the outside looking into the world of, molecular biology and genetics and think, wow, these guys have they have the keystone to understanding the human body. And then you dig a little further and what you realize are not really. Most people are following the work of a few who are really leading the pack. And I would say this industry is not dissimilar to any of those. There are a few people that have the courage to have their own perspective and do what they think is right. And then there's a lot of people that do what those other people do and chase so that they're not late. And so what you can't get tricked by are like the educational qualifications of people, meaningless, okay? Doesn't matter where you went to school. Doesn't matter you have an MBA from Harvard or Stanford. There are a lot of idiots I've met that have MBAs from Harvard and Stanford. And there's a lot of geniuses I've met that have dropped out of school.
Right.
So, I would say you should have a healthy skepticism to this industry, like every other industry. In most industries, there's just a few people that are really good, and most industries are cluttered with a bunch of people who run around following those few people.
Now, do you think VC funding is always necessary? Some companies have an explicit goal of, hey, I'm going to take this idea, and once I get funding, I'm going to exit. So do you think that, funding is always necessary for a startup?
It's not necessary, especially now because you can find very different forms of capital. And that's why I think it's a very healthy dynamic, because now the entrepreneur becomes more empowered to build the type of company they want, the type of culture they want, to stay in. So for example, I know a lot of really, really great entrepreneurs who've taken capital from some of the most prestigious venture capital firms in the world only to get fired. And when you look backwards on that decision, they think it's the single worst decision they've ever made. And, sometimes these companies have gone public, these people have become rich, but it didn't matter to them because it left such a bad taste in their mouth. And so, now you could look at that and say, well, so what? You could have gone, you wouldn't have been public. Well, we don't know that, right? The counterfactual is impossible to know. But what it does tell me is now that you can go to AngelList, or if you're building a product, you can go on Kickstarter and deficit finance a bunch of stuff. It creates all these competitive forces that now rationalizes power back to the individuals who are starting and working at companies. And in my opinion, that is much better. And so, I just think it'll just create better behaviors and better outcomes. And outcomes may not mean like splashy IPOs. Outcome may just mean like you can hire, 50 people and you run a company that's profitable and, you're a great member of your community. You have a great lifestyle. You spend time with your kids. Your kids are normal. All of the executives on your team are great people in their community. Their kids are normal. That will do more to change the world than like being a douche and having $1 billion IPO.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So legacy is a very tricky, interesting thing. And I think, again, people chase these societally defined norms of what success is. And I think like now that there's all of these different ways, the real challenge is for all of us to deconstruct that and actually like live our own lives.
Right. So to wrap it up, what advice do you have to future entrepreneurs out there?
I think it's very hard like to give you like one pithy soundbite. But again, I think it's like having the courage to be yourself, healthy skepticism and cynicism. Do not develop a sense of like, idolatry around any individual person. Don't read the blogs. Don't read Twitter. All of that stuff, again, is a whole amount of, self-reinforcing rhetoric and promotional propaganda that can be informative, but needs to be balanced with your own internal sense of what you want to do, how you want to do it. That's the most important thing. A lot of false idols. So just be very careful. Listen to your own gut. You're probably the best decision maker that you know.
Well, thanks, Chamath. Thank you for taking the time to do this.